Have you ever noticed the growing distance between an older woman and her husband? It's something that often lingers in the air, whispered behind closed doors, but never truly spoken aloud. People might say, "She's just tired," or "They've been together for too long." But if we're being honest, the truth goes much deeper than that. As time passes, women start to look at their marriages with new eyes, eyes that have seen the weight of years, the silence that settled in, and the imbalance that grew over decades. What once might have seemed small or unimportant now feels like an undeniable presence. It's a cocktail of emotions: grief, anger, disappointment, and yes, sometimes even resentment, that begins to simmer beneath the surface. In this video, we're going to take a closer look at 6 powerful reasons why some women begin to resent or even hate their husbands as they grow older. These aren't about fleeting arguments or minor personality clashes. No, these reasons are rooted in deep, emotional struggles that have quietly built up over time: unspoken exhaustion, unmet needs, and the weight of a love that over the years wasn't always nurtured in the ways it should have been. If you've ever sensed a shift in your relationship, or wondered why your wife seems different now, you're not imagining it. We're about to explore why the emotional distance grows, and why, for many, it becomes harder to bridge that gap as time moves on. Stay with us until the very end, because the final reason may open your eyes in a way you never expected. This isn't just about relationships. It's about understanding the deep emotional truths that shape how we feel and connect as we age. Let's begin this journey into the heart of an issue many feel but few talk about. Reason 1. The weight of emotional labor becomes undeniable. As women age, something powerful starts to shift in the way they perceive their relationships. What once seemed like a natural part of their role, the emotional labor, the constant effort to keep the family together, now becomes glaringly clear. For years, they've carried an invisible load, and now, with more time to reflect, that weight is hard to ignore. Think about all the small, everyday things that fall on a woman's shoulders: remembering birthdays, scheduling doctor's appointments, calming arguments, managing the household, planning holidays, and keeping the family connected. It's not just the housework. It's the unseen emotional work that holds everything together. It may have started as a series of tasks she took on with love, maybe even a sense of duty. But over time, that duty turns into a quiet, suffocating exhaustion. The children have grown, and the house has become quieter. And now, with less to fill the day, women start to notice just how much of this emotional labor has been one-sided. The problem isn't that their husbands were cruel or inattentive. No, the issue lies in the fact that their husbands never even noticed. They didn't see the toll it took, the way it wore her down, the emotional investment that she carried alone for so many years. This realization often comes in the 60s or 70s, when time slows down and women have the space to ask themselves difficult questions. Why was I always the one worrying? Why didn't he ever step in and learn to handle these things? And it's not anger or bitterness that fuels these thoughts. It's exhaustion. Deep, silent, long-lasting exhaustion that has been building for decades. Take Carol, for example. She's 74 now. For most of her marriage, she was the one managing everything, remembering to refill prescriptions, planning holidays, smoothing over family tensions. Her husband, Tom, always said, "You're just better at that stuff." But as the years went by, Carol realized that wasn't a compliment. It was a dismissal. He never tried. And now, that realization sits like a stone in her chest. And it's not just Carol. Countless women have carried this emotional weight in silence. And when they finally have the time to reflect, it can feel like the last straw. They don't just feel distant from their husbands, they feel tired of them. tired of carrying a burden that no one ever saw or acknowledged. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding that emotional labor, when it's not shared or recognized, can slowly erode the connection in a marriage. It's about how one person's constant giving, year after year, can eventually lead to feelings of depletion and disillusionment. And when that imbalance is finally noticed, it can't easily be undone. Reason 2. The slow breakdown of real communication. One of the most painful aspects of growing old in a long-term marriage is the gradual erosion of real communication. It doesn't happen overnight, and that's what makes it so insidious. At first, it's easy to overlook the simple, everyday exchanges. Did you take your pills? Or, what's for dinner? These conversations fill the space, and we tell ourselves that everything is fine. But over time, what's missing is what really matters: the deeper connection, the laughter, the meaningful check-ins, the moments of vulnerability when we let ourselves truly be seen by the person closest to us. For many women, especially those in their 70s and beyond, the silence that fills the space can become deafening. It's not that they want endless philosophical debates every night or deep, emotional heart-to-hearts. What they crave is something simpler but just as vital: to be noticed, to have someone look at them and care about what's happening in their inner world, to hear, "How are you really doing?" Not just in a passing superficial way, but with genuine curiosity. But when that deep personal connection fades, it creates a kind of quiet grief. It's not the loss of a partner, but the loss of feeling seen, the loss of a closeness that once existed. And what's worse, it's the loss of something that used to be there. The silence doesn't speak of peace. It speaks of loneliness. Consider Joyce, who's 79 and has been married to Frank for over 50 years. They sit in front of the TV, eat the same meals, and share the same space. But Joyce can't remember the last time Frank asked how she was feeling, really feeling. Not about her blood pressure or her joints, but about her heart, her spirit. It's not that she needs poetry or grand gestures. She just misses the simple curiosity, the sense that someone still cares about what's going on inside her. But for Frank, everything seems fine. He thinks they're getting along just fine. No fights, no drama. And yet Joyce feels a painful shift. She feels more like a roommate than a wife. And the worst part? He doesn't even realize it. He's not mean, and he's not deliberately dismissive. But the silence has slowly replaced the warmth that once filled their conversations. When you stop being curious about your partner's inner world, you start to lose the very essence of the relationship. And as the silence builds, so does the distance. It's not about what is said, it's about what isn't. And over time, that void becomes harder and harder to ignore. That emotional disconnect, born of forgotten curiosity and unspoken words, can create an ever-widening gap between two people who once shared everything. It's the slow, painful breakdown of a bond that once felt unshakable. And for many women, this silence becomes unbearable, as they long for the warmth of a conversation that matters, even if it's just about the little things. Reason 3. Unequal caregiving creates silent resentment. As time passes and health declines, caregiving becomes an inescapable part of many long-term marriages. Illness, surgeries, chronic conditions, all of these things shift the balance of a relationship. And often, it's the woman who steps up to care for her husband, without question, without pause. It's a role that many women take on out of love, out of habit, or sometimes out of sheer necessity. But beneath that quiet service, something else begins to stir. Resentment. At first, it's subtle. She simply does what needs to be done. Measuring pills, helping with mobility, scheduling doctor appointments, and cooking meals. She's been doing it for years. After all, this is what love requires, right? But over time, as the burden grows heavier, a quiet, simmering resentment starts to bubble up. And she doesn't always recognize it at first. She just keeps going, doing what needs to be done. But with each passing day, she begins to feel the weight, not just of the caregiving, but of the imbalance. Because deep down, she remembers when she needed support. And it wasn't always there. It wasn't that her husband didn't love her. It's just that, in the past, he never quite showed up the way she did. He didn't notice her needs the way she noticed his. She gave and gave, often without asking for much in return. And now, when the roles are reversed, it's hard not to notice the difference. Margaret, 82, knows this feeling all too well. Her husband, Bill, had a stroke at 76, and since then, Margaret has cared for him every day, helping him bathe, managing his medications, making sure he's comfortable. She loves him, but she's worn thin. What breaks her heart isn't the caregiving itself, but the memory of when she had surgery years ago and asked Bill to cook or clean for just 1 week. He grumbled, complained, and didn't step up the way she needed him to. Now, when she's exhausted, when she needs a break, the weight of that memory comes rushing back, and she can't shake it. This kind of silent resentment doesn't come from the caregiving itself. It comes from the years of imbalance that came before it. It comes from the times when she was strong for him, when she adjusted and compromised, while he stayed the same. In the later years of life, when caregiving becomes the reality, those old memories resurface. They don't come in bursts of anger. Instead, they rise quietly, like the slow buildup of a storm. And it's hard to talk about. Many women feel guilty just thinking it. They wonder, does this make me a bad person? The answer is no. It makes them human. It means they've given a lot, maybe more than their share. And it's okay to feel the weight of that. It's okay to name the imbalance, especially when it's been ignored for so many years. When caregiving becomes one-sided, when one person feels like they've been carrying the weight for far too long, it can create a rift that's difficult to repair. The love is still there, but the fatigue is wearing her down. The resentment doesn't always shout. It whispers, building over the years until it feels like an unspoken truth that can't be ignored any longer. Reason 4. A lifetime without appreciation takes its toll. There's a quiet, invisible pain that builds up over the years when a woman feels unappreciated. It doesn't come from one grand event, but from the countless small moments that go unnoticed, year after year. The daily sacrifices, the behind-the-scenes work, the love given without expectation. These things can go unacknowledged for so long that eventually it takes a toll on the person who has been giving. For many women, this feeling of being overlooked starts to sting more as they grow older. It doesn't mean they need constant praise or recognition. It's not about wanting applause, but about the simple desire to feel seen. Over a lifetime, women do so much that often goes unnoticed. They remember birthdays, they plan family holidays, they manage schedules, they keep the house running smoothly, and they support their partners through thick and thin. And when that work, that constant giving, isn't recognized, it begins to feel as though it doesn't matter. It starts to feel like a duty instead of an act of love. Take Lorraine, for example. She's 77 and has been married to John for over 50 years. She raised 3 children, worked part-time, made every holiday special, and supported John through every job change and family loss. But John rarely said thank you, not because he was mean or uncaring, but because he assumed she would always be there. He didn't notice the sacrifices she made, the emotional labor she shouldered. Now, in retirement, Lorraine is angry, not because of one single thing, but because of a lifetime of being quietly overlooked. And that feeling of being unappreciated builds over time. At first, it might have been enough to hear a thank you every once in a while. Maybe she let it slide, thinking that it was just the way things were. But after decades of giving, it starts to feel less like love and more like being taken for granted. And when love turns into duty without gratitude, it wears a person down. In older age, when women have more time to reflect on their lives, they begin to ask themselves, what did I give, and what did I get in return? And if the answer feels lopsided, if the emotional bank account feels empty, it creates a sadness that's hard to name. Some might call it regret, others might call it disappointment. But deep down, it's a longing to have mattered, not just as a wife or mother, but as a person. When appreciation goes unnoticed, it silently erodes the foundation of a relationship. And over time, that unspoken hurt can lead to emotional distance. It's not about hate. It's about feeling invisible, feeling like all that was given never truly mattered. And when that happens, a wedge forms. A quiet, painful wedge, and it's hard to bridge it after so many years of silence. The lack of appreciation isn't just about the big moments. It's about the daily, ordinary things that matter more than people realize. When these go unnoticed, when they're never acknowledged, it leads to a quiet, growing resentment that can change the dynamic of the marriage forever. Reason 5. The quiet loss of independence and identity. As the years go by, many women start to look back on their lives with a sharper lens. They begin to see all the ways they've given up pieces of themselves, sometimes willingly, sometimes unknowingly. Not because they were forced, but because they believed that this was what love, family, and commitment required of them. Dreams, careers, passions, friendships, and even their own voice were often set aside in the name of family. But as they age, and especially when the hustle of raising children and building a life slows down, the question arises, what about me? When you're younger, there's always something to do. Kids to raise, bills to pay, dinners to cook, a house to maintain. Life is busy, and there's little time to stop and ask yourself, what do I want? What about my dreams? But when the kids leave the house, when the daily grind slows down, that question comes rushing back. And for many women, the answer is painful, because the things they once dreamed of doing, the things they once hoped for, have often been buried under years of compromise and self-sacrifice. Eleanor, for example, is 75. When she was younger, she had a deep love for music. She dreamed of becoming a music teacher, but life had other plans. She married young, raised 4 children, and worked part-time to help with the bills. Her husband encouraged her to stay home when the kids were small, and later told her they couldn't afford music lessons. And so, the dream was put aside. Now, in her quiet living room, Eleanor finds herself wondering what could have been. What would have happened if she had said no just once in a while? If she had chosen herself at least a few times? This feeling is not about blaming anyone, least of all her husband. He didn't stop her with anger or cruelty. He just never asked what she wanted. Over time, she stopped asking too. But now, with time to reflect, the result is the same. She feels like a stranger in her own life, defined more by the role she played than by the person she is. As women get older and they finally have the space to breathe, to remember who they used to be, that sense of lost identity can come with a sense of anger, grief, and even resentment, not just for what was lost, but for how invisible those losses were to the person closest to them. They look at their partner and feel as though their own needs, their own desires, were always secondary. The life they once envisioned for themselves was replaced by the roles they played for others. In old age, many women start reclaiming pieces of themselves. They take up hobbies they once loved. They pursue long-forgotten dreams. They redefine what it means to live for themselves. But this rediscovery can cause tension. The partner who's been used to things a certain way might not know how to handle it. They've grown comfortable in the old patterns, and when their wife begins to change, it can feel like a threat. But here's the truth. When a woman begins to assert her independence again, to remember who she is, she's not being selfish. She's remembering her worth. She's learning to prioritize her own needs, her own desires, and her own life. And that process can be both freeing and painful. Freeing because she's reclaiming herself. Painful because it brings up all the years she spent in silence, in sacrifice, in self-forgetfulness. And for many women, this emotional shift can breed frustration, even bitterness, not because they didn't love their partner, but because somewhere along the way, they lost themselves in the name of love and family. The quiet resentment isn't about the present. It's about what was lost in the past and how it feels to realize that it was never truly acknowledged. As they enter the later stages of life, many women are faced with the question, who am I now? And when the person they've spent decades sharing their life with doesn't know how to answer that, it creates an emotional distance that can feel insurmountable. The emotional cost of losing yourself is heavy, and the journey to reclaim that lost identity can be filled with both joy and sorrow. Reason 6. Different approaches to aging and personal growth. As the years go by, aging impacts everyone differently. For some, it's a time of growth and self-reflection, a chance to reconnect with old passions, discover new hobbies, or deepen relationships. For others, aging can lead to withdrawal, complacency, and a quiet resignation to the passage of time. This difference in how each partner approaches aging can create a divide that becomes difficult to ignore, especially in the later years of life. For many women, aging is an opportunity to reclaim what was put aside. With the children grown and the daily responsibilities less demanding, they have space to explore new interests, to reflect on their lives, and to take care of themselves in ways they hadn't before. They might join a book club, pick up painting, start walking every morning, or travel to places they've always dreamed of. But for many men, retirement and old age bring a kind of passivity. They sink into their favorite chair, watch television, and complain about aches and pains. They stop caring about their health, their appearance, or their emotional engagement with life and the people around them. It's not that they don't deserve rest. They've worked hard their whole lives. But for the women who are still eager to engage with life, still curious and emotionally alive, this passivity can feel like abandonment. It's not about skydiving or taking dance lessons. It's about being present. It's about showing that you still care, that you still have something to offer. When one partner is actively exploring the world and finding new ways to enjoy life, while the other has emotionally checked out, it creates a sense of loneliness, even in the same room. Take Susan, for example. She's 73 and has recently started to embrace a new chapter of her life. She joined a book club, began painting again, and started walking every morning to stay active. Meanwhile, her husband, Richard, spends most of his days in his recliner, watching TV and complaining about his knees. He ignores his doctor's advice, resists any changes to his routine, and shows little interest in anything beyond his familiar, safe world. At first, Susan tried to encourage him to join her in some of her new activities, but he was uninterested, dismissing her efforts as extra rather than essential. Susan doesn't resent Richard for getting older. What frustrates her is that he's stopped trying. He's stopped meeting her halfway. He no longer makes an effort to stay engaged in the relationship, to connect emotionally, or to care for himself. She feels stuck. She's growing, exploring, and thriving in ways she never imagined possible, but she's doing it alone. And over time, that frustration builds into a sense of abandonment. For many women in this stage of life, aging becomes a second chance, a time to finally pursue their own interests, to find joy in what they've put on hold for so long. But when their partner isn't willing to grow with them, when they've stopped engaging emotionally, it feels like a death of sorts, a quiet, slow erosion of the relationship. It's not just about health or physical appearance. It's about emotional engagement, a willingness to keep trying, to stay present. When one partner withdraws, it's like the other has to carry the entire weight of the relationship on their shoulders. The loneliness is suffocating. It's not about grand gestures. It's about the absence of curiosity, the absence of effort, the absence of the emotional connection that used to be there. For many women, this lack of growth, this unwillingness to engage, becomes unbearable. It creates a wedge that no amount of love or patience can close. As the years pass, women don't just want to be taken care of. They want to feel like they matter. They want to be met with the same curiosity and energy they're bringing to the relationship. And when that doesn't happen, when they realize they're carrying the weight of the relationship alone, the emotional distance grows. It becomes harder to ignore and harder to fix. At its core, this reason isn't about blame. It's about a disconnect between two people who once walked side by side, but now find themselves on different paths. And when that disconnect isn't addressed, it doesn't just lead to frustration. It leads to deep emotional loneliness, even in the presence of the person they love. After exploring these 6 powerful reasons, it becomes clear that the emotional distance many older women feel from their husbands isn't a result of sudden conflict or a single event. It's the cumulative effect of years of emotional labor, silent resentments, unspoken needs, and unacknowledged sacrifices. These feelings don't develop overnight. They grow quietly, like cracks in a foundation, until one day they can no longer be ignored. What stands out most in this exploration is not bitterness or anger, but deep emotional exhaustion. It's the weariness of having carried so much without recognition, the grief of a relationship that has been eroded by years of silence, the loneliness of being in a partnership that no longer feels like a true connection. These reasons are not about blaming anyone. They are about understanding the complexities that arise when the demands of life overshadow the emotional needs of a relationship. It's about recognizing that over time, many women find themselves tired, not of the man they married, but of the emotional work they've carried alone, of the quiet neglect that has slowly drained the intimacy they once shared. But perhaps the most important takeaway is that these feelings don't have to define the remainder of a relationship. Understanding why this distance has grown can be the first step in healing it. It's not too late to reconnect, to rekindle the emotional intimacy that has been lost. It's about finally being seen and heard, acknowledging the struggles that have been quietly carried for so long, and validating those emotions that have never been named. For many women, the pain of unappreciated years and unacknowledged sacrifices is not just a sadness. It's a call for change. It's a chance to look back, reflect, and say, "This mattered. I mattered." And perhaps in that recognition comes the opportunity for both partners to grow, to finally meet each other where they are now, and to find a new way forward. So if you found these insights valuable, take a moment to reflect on your own relationships. What's been left unsaid? What's been unacknowledged? And how can you begin to address it? It's never too late to start that conversation, whether with your partner or with yourself, and to bring light to the emotional truths that have been hidden for far too long.